Denise's story is about these lovely canoes that you see in the front here. I would encourage you all at some point in the day to come and have a closer look. This was a labor of love, and Dennise is going to talk about that and the story behind those canoes. So come and have a look and ask her some questions, and she'll be here so you can chat her up. And this is another departure, because I think this is less than a story and more of a journey, this next one. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that and Denise's journey. So we'd like to welcome Dennise Pemmican to the stage, and I hope you enjoy her story. You good?
Yeah, you're good. Okay. Bonjour. Ogima Gijiko Kwe Indigo, Nagigdo Dem, Wajishka Nigam Dunji, Dennise Pemmican Nidishnakas. Hello and good morning. My name is Dennise Pemmican, and on behalf of my sister, Shelley Seymour, who was a major support of this project, is not able to be here, I will be sharing a little story about birch bark and community spirit. And may I introduce to you the star of our story, spruce roots. As I was creating the story, like you, I think that I would have said the birch bark canoe would have been the star of the story. Her name is Ozhitaan, and this is our baby right here. Would have been the star of the story, but thinking back to our build 3 years ago, it all comes down to the root. Not only the roots of the beautiful black spruce that hold our canoe together, but that of our own roots and where we come from. Thinking back to why we wanted to build a birch bark canoe, for me, it came down to two things. One, a sense of curiosity. Curiosity of natural materials and the gifts and knowledge found in our backyards, whether it's the birch bark tree, the birch tree, spruce trees, cedar trees, or the water. Knowledge that I am myself lacking but learning about. These amazing gifts that we see each and every day. We drive by, but we just may not have the time to look at. It came down to a curiosity of the teachings and the skills needed in building such an integral part of our history. Second, it came down to a sense of connection. Connection to community, coming together, sharing stories, laughter, and memories. It came down to a desire to strengthen the connection to the land, not only for myself, but for those people who I would talk to and they would want to know more about the land. And finally, it came down to connecting with family. Remembering not only immediate family, but honoring our ancestors who did daily what we set out to do for the first time. I just wanted to mention that we do have this, my sister, we have their 16-foot birch bark canoe here, but we also have, I think it's 8 or 6 feet foot canoe here that my grandfather built in 1982. Peter Seymour, he was a canoe builder, among many other talents. So it was in the winter of 2014, with a mix of nervousness and curiosity, and with a goal in mind, I set out to meet a canoe builder by the name of Darren Lentz in Thunder Bay. You may have heard of him. We planned to meet in early May, possibly mid-May, or maybe late May, or maybe even June. And then the reason that I say that is because it all depended on the tree. It's not something that we could set our schedule to. It was when the tree was ready to be harvested. So as soon as I got that phone call, he says, because he was checking the trees daily, he says, no, now is the time. So I jumped in my car, my dog in tow, and we drove out and I met him. And what an experience it was. To those who may not have had the opportunity to work with birch bark or to harvest it, birch bark does need to be harvested at a certain time in the spring when the energy is flowing through the tree, and it's such a strong energy to feel, and the sap is running. Trying to harvest the bark too soon or too late in the season makes it difficult and actually almost impossible to get that layer of bark that you need. To do it too soon, you'll just rip off like the top layer of bark, and that's not going to be strong enough to hold the canoe. You do it too late, again, it's going to connect that layer of bark that you need, will just connect right back to the tree. But as soon as you have that sap flowing, when you slice into that tree, it just pops off the tree. It's actually really amazing to behold, to see the life within this tree. And when you want to make sure that you do it at the right time, because you don't want to harm the tree. That's not our intent, to kill the tree. It's a gift. It's providing us a gift to build our canoe. And so that was one of the major teachings that I learned on this journey, is the gifts. And it's not something that you just take randomly. So in addition to considering the time of the year to harvest the birch bark, you need a tall ladder, somebody that you can trust to hold the ladder as you climb this huge tree to get the largest piece of bark that you can, a sharp knife, a good supply of bug spray, because I've never seen so many mosquitoes in my life where I was just choking on them. And Darren, I had mitts on, I had clothes double layers, and I was just covered with a mosquito net around my head, and I was still choking on these mosquitoes. And then to see Darren, who has done this his whole life, and he's taken people out to experience this. He had he had a shirt on, he had a shirt, he was just no hat, no nothing. I'm like, how does he do this? But it was quite the experience. So you want to make sure you have a good supply of bug spray. And for me, I needed a faithful dog that helped me find my way back to the truck when I found myself lost. And I have to admit, I had a big roll of birch bark on my shoulder, and I was trudging back to the truck, and I realized, I don't know where I'm going. And that was when Darren, he says, before we went into the bush, he's really safe, and he's like, well, this is where we are. You have your compass. This is north, this is south, this is if you get lost, you can hear the traffic, you can hear this. He had me well prepared, but it's amazing when you're in the bush and you're not used to being out in the bush, all that goes out the door. And so I'm like, what do I do? So luckily that time in the bush, I had my dog with me, Otis. And literally I said, Otis, take us home. I said, Otis, you know the way. And no word of a lie, I followed my dog, and he took us right back to the truck. So for me, it's always good to know where you're going to be and where you are in the bush. And for myself, it was nice to have my dog with me. And we also brought good intentions and tobacco as an offering, and to say thank you. So once we gathered the bark, we would not meet again until the end of July here in Kenora, at 7 Generations just outside this room. In 1 week, we built a 16-foot birch bark canoe. So I have a number of slides. Some I might go into a little in depth about, but this was the beginning of our canoe build. We hauled the sand out to the site here. We decided to camp at the site just for security purposes. There were long days, so it was just sort of a little easier. My aunt and my uncle ended up bringing a trailer because I'm not good in a tent. I'm very grateful for that. But this is us just preparing the site. What we wanted to do is we wanted to do everything in good intentions. So we laid out the soil, we cleaned it from rocks, and we put cedar down just to keep us safe and to use the gifts of the cedar. And so here we are just as a group. This is the first day. And here we are, the spruce root. It all comes down to the spruce root. This is when I was excited about spruce root, before I realized it would become a bane of my existence. But here we are, we're just starting to settle the template down. Darren, he was the only person who knew what he was doing at this build. The rest of us were just there to learn. Oops. And so here is our build, and there's the large pieces of birch bark that we harvested. It was actually in early June that we were able to harvest them. We have our poles and our template ready to be built. And what I love is looking through in the history books and seeing that this is the same way it's been done forever. The way they have the stakes, like the poles built. It's just amazing. And it's the way my grandpa would have done it as well. And so here we are. I thought we would be, we're done, we have the birch bark, we put it to go, we're ready to start building the canoe. But one of the main parts of it is cleaning the birch bark. So what we do here is all of those little wisps that you find on birch bark, you clean them off. So we had people just, taking the time, because it was a community event. So people were working on spruce root, people were working on the birch bark, people were working on the cedar poles. So this was one of the jobs that we had to do, is just go through and clean off those wisps of birch bark, just so it wouldn't snag and tear later. And here we are with our first long piece of birch bark that we put down. I was amazed at how pliable that the bark was, how forgiving the birch bark was. And it was a really tall ladder. So here we are bending the birch bark. And the main thing that we had a lot of water with us, a lot of hot water that we would have to use to bend the birch bark. We would just sort of pour it on the bark, and then they would be more pliable to bend and work with so it wouldn't tear. And so we each had a turn hammering the mallet, putting it in and bending it. I did really good on that. Some people were scared when I had the hammer in my hand, but we made it. And so this was the spruce root. I'm not too sure how many people have collected spruce root. This was the first time that I had. And so Darren, he made a game of it. So the person who had the longest spruce root won. The spruce root that you were looking for would be the width of your fingertip. And so we were in the bush. We were just collecting the spruce root. There was a whole group of us out there. Getting our hands dirty, and sorry, it's just not moving forward here. Sorry, here we are. And so we just had a group of us just out in the bush collecting spruce roots. We had little ones, we had Kaden, and we had Laura, and it was just sort of in the bush gathering. It was amazing how we just all came together and were searching for the longest root possible, because the more you had, the longer it was, the easier it was to clean and split. And it was really nice to be out in the nature and seeing, because when you're digging in the soil and harvesting birch bark, it's hard not to open one's eyes to the life found within the roots and within the trees. It just sort of gives you a new awareness of what is happening in the forest, things you wouldn't normally see speeding by in a car. Sorry. So here we are, we have Darren Lentz, and there's our pile of spruce root. And we also have, this is Kitty Everson, she's my great aunt. She was out there and she was providing teachings and things that, again, when you're just sort of in the bush and you're just, she was like, oh, this is what we do this is for. This is what we used to use this for. And it's just sort of other teachings and knowledge that weren't part, like we didn't plan for. It was amazing. We didn't mind getting dirty. And then this was the hard part. For everyone who was able to get out there and sort of split and clean the spruce roots, it was just never ending. Every day, even right from to the final day, we were splitting these roots. It was like never ending because we needed a lot of roots. And so as the week went on, it became a little less exciting, but you're still aware of the gift of it. But it was like, oh no, more roots. So it was just constant roots. And so here we are, cleaned and split, and then we have our big garbage pail of roots to continue nonstop. But it was a time when we were doing the spruce roots that you're able to talk, to sharing stories, because people in the community would come down and they would just want to be curious themselves to see what was going on and share their story of what maybe their time that they've seen in birch bark. You know, somebody may have paddled in it, they built one. It was amazing just the camaraderie. So here we are, we're getting a bit of more of a form of the canoe. And throughout the time, it was just amazing to be able to be with the community, actually. And so here's the spruce root being put to work, and this is the stitching of the pieces together. Again, we were all new at this, but what I love is the fact that we were all came from different places. There are different stories, levels of experience. Our stitches were the same. Like, we were there for a common goal. And I think for me, this is one of my favorite pictures because it just sort of shows how we all can come together. And so here we are. We're just sort of working. It was hot. It was summer. There were so memories that were made by community members who, again, stopped by and shared their knowledge, their time, and thankfully their food. So the more food you had, the more people that came out, and it was great. And so it was just everyone took turns building the canoe. And again, this is one of my favorite pictures because it just shows that was stitched by so many different people. And it's the inside, so that's the other side, like at the top there would be the inside of the canoe, and those are our stitches. We're coming together. So these are our teepee poles. That was one of the other things, like we were set out to plan to build a canoe, but what we did was we had other things that came. So my sister, Shelley Seymour, she works with the Anishinaabe Quake, and she has a Head Start program, and they needed teepee poles for their teepee. And so we went out into the bush, and we found some large poles, and while people who needed to take a break from either building the canoe or cleaning the spruce roots, they went and they started stripping teepee poles for the Head Start program here in Kenora. And again, we're talking about the spruce root, and again, it all comes down to the spruce root, because without the spruce root, it wouldn't be where, it's all about the spruce root. And so here we are, we're doing the gunnels? See, I don't know anything about canoes. I'm still learning, to tell you the truth. So yes, and so we also have the sashing. That's the word I was going to use. And so that was like a never-ending. It seemed like it was going to be never-ending, but it was. You had to be so precise in putting them together. And again, it was all about patience and determination and knowing that we're not doing this alone, but together. During the build, because we had some kids come down and they were doing like a show and tell, so they were able to play with the wood, play with the cedar, and just sort of talk, and just a time of questions. And so here it is. We took out all the rocks that were keeping the shape of the canoe, and this is the day that we took out the rocks. And it happened also to be the day that there was a major storm here in Kenora, and it actually flooded the site that we were building in. And it flooded it, and I remember the night of the storm, I went home, and Darren Lentz stayed with the canoe. But I came back the next morning, the tent was flattened, everything was soaked. and the site was flooded. Like, it was up to my calf in water. So I'm like, what are we going to do? Like, people are coming in, and we won't be able to get to the canoe. But it was a blessing because it actually held water. And our canoe didn't leak. And so I'm like, I'll worry about that later. So I'm like, trying to shovel the rainwater away from the canoe. And then we had to laugh because I left the water, and then sure enough, the canoe filled with water, and it didn't leak. And so not only did the rain, which I thought was sort of a nuisance, but it was a blessing in that it dampened the wood. It dampened the spruce roots, so it was less brittle to work with. So looking back on it, though, it was just funny that our site was flooded, but we flooded our canoe. This is actually on the inside of the canoe. I was away collecting spruce roots, so I'm not too sure how this was made, but it is an integral part of the canoe. And so when you look at the canoe, you can see how it's sort of holding the shape of the curve. And then as part of all of the teachings that sort of you didn't plan for on this event, one of them was the birch bark baskets. Darren not only knows how to build canoes, but he knows how to build birch bark baskets. So what he did is, for all of the birch bark that was remaining, he taught us how to build birch bark baskets. And so we had everyone who wanted to come out, we had small baskets, large baskets, everyone had their hand to try it. And of course, we have KFC. Okay, so here we are. We're starting to put the cedar planking in. And it was quite the chore because you had to keep them steamed. But the smell of the cedar, I'll never forget. Just the wetness of that wood. And here we are creating the cedar planks that'll have to be bent and form the canoe. And again, it's all by hand. We had just so many different people helping out. And it was a community event. And so thankful that the people who came out were willing to try it, even if they weren't sure how to do it. We just put a tool in their hand, and there we went. And here we are bending the cedar planks again. And I had to show this picture because this gentleman here, he really wanted to help build the canoe. He was there daily. He was there in and out. We weren't it was all volunteer. If you just wanted to come out and play with the materials. But it wasn't until this day that we found out he was allergic to cedar. And we said, back away from the tree. But he wanted to get involved. So then once we knew this, okay, we'll get him the gloves. We get him to keep him safe. But he had built a canoe prior, so we didn't know until later on in the week that he knew what he was doing, and he was just sort of very patient with us, but he was allergic to cedar. And so when it comes down to connection, why I wanted to do this, it's about connecting with family. So this is my mom, Alice Pemmican, and my brother, Travis. He wanted to get involved, so we let him cut a piece of wood. As the older sister, I'm thinking, I think you can do this. I think you can handle this. So here's, after all of that work that we did the ribs, or the gunnels. Ribs of the boat, so here it is. And there's sort of where we kept the water damp, the canoe damp, so we learned from that weather, that storm. We always put water in the boat. We learned from the nature, we learned. It was an amazing experience. And so here we are. We're sort of mixing technology of modern day with traditional knowledge, but this is normally used spruce pitch. But due to the time frame of 7 days and learning how to do spruce pitch, that's a whole different knowledge and project on its own. We used mariner's glue. So we're doing a bit of the new and the old here. And also, it was funny because this was the final day, and this is the day that we had to get it in the water. And so the mariner's glue wasn't even dry when we put it in the water. So we had the hair dryers out there. We were blowing on it. We were doing everything to help keep this canoe afloat when we put it in the water. And this is called winter etching. This is called bark etching. We had Burton Penner. He actually drew the shapes, the images on the canoe. And I just, if you want to, when you look later, there is water and paper towel. So if you dab the images just that are found right at the ends, it just sort of shines. So what we did is my sister, the artist, she sketched them. So she was just sort of scraping the bark down. And so once you wet the canoe, they just pop. And so we're really thankful for that. And so that was the end of the pictures. But I just wanted to say that on the final day, we took the canoe to Anishinaabe Park and we launched her. For those present, and for those who were wanting to, Darren took everyone for a short paddle. It was beyond exciting, especially when she stayed afloat. It was like, yes, yes. Since then, we feast Ozhitaan and take her to the water. This was a teaching that came a few months after the build, that Ozhitaan, a name given to me, given to the canoe by Kitty Everson. She's my great aunt and my grandma's sister. Ozhitaan was my grandma's name. Ozhitaan is to be honored in that it's more than just a canoe. The energy and the life of the tree, its bark, its roots, its core, and the people who put their own energy and time into it are to be remembered and honored. And I have to admit, since this project, my eyes have been opened and slightly more aware of the history not found in books. I see it now, written on the trees, written on the scabbing you see on birch bark trees. My sense of curiosity makes me wonder, what had the bark been used for? Was it used for baskets? Was it used for housing? Was it used for canoes? It makes me wonder what the land has seen and the people who have walked and paddled this area before me. Though I was the voice of the story this morning, I have to share that this was just one that came from this build. There were so many people involved with the story. There were so many people who contributed to its being, that it's just one voice. I just wanted to say thank you for having us here today, and that it brought to mind many stories and memories temporarily forgotten, but made during that eventful week in July. I would like to thank the Lake of the Woods Ojibwe Cultural Center for allowing us to have my grandfather's canoe here today. And finally, some words of advice. Should you want to build a birch bark canoe, it's possible. It's doable. But just don't do it in a week. Miigwech.